Okay, I don't know who's going to be watching this, so anyway, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dennis Harkavy. I generally referred to as Grandpa by most of you, and I'm going to start with a story most of you have not heard before. I was married to Phyllis Estelle Fogelman in Philadelphia on December 23rd, 1951. And we're going to refer to Phyllis as Grandma, because it won't be everyone's grandma, but that's the way I'll be referring to her in our conversation. Anyway, I'm out of order and out of sequence. I'm going to go to my wedding day, and you have to understand it better, you have to know a little Hebrew. Ben, B-E-N, means son of, and my father's name was Harold. So the rabbi says, to you, Daniel Ben Heschel, Dennis, son of Harold, take Pessi Essie to be here, and he finished that up. But the Pessi Essie floored me, and it floored Grandma. She was wondering if I was going to turn around and run away. And anyway, it became a running joke with us, kidding each other about the Pessi Essie, and not too many of you know about that. So I wanted to start with something fresh. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about me, and let me boast a little bit and get that on the record and get that out of the way. I'm not sure exactly how far back to go. I graduated from Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn, which at that time was a very prestigious high school, and it isn't that anymore, but it was at that time. It was like El Camino is today, that kind of level. And I went to the Wharton School, which I shared with our illustrious president, sarcastically. Anyway, that's part of the University of Pennsylvania. And I met Grandma on a blind date while I was going to school. And I'll talk about some of that after a while. But I went from Wharton. I graduated there in 1951, and went to Brooklyn Law School. And after Brooklyn Law School, 2 years in the Army, and then we moved to California, and I became a CPA and attorney. I was also admitted to the New York bar. I want to get some of my boasting out of the way, some of my accomplishments. In law school, I was given the Dean's Award for pleading in practice, which was a big surprise. And I took the CPA exam in California, and I passed it in the first shot, all 4 parts, which was I'd say less than 10% of those taken pass it in one shot. Usually you can pass it in 3 different sections. And I was listed, I'm just picking out some different things that I want to talk about. I was listed in a book called Best Lawyers in America. It was put out by people from Harvard, and there were 31 attorneys listed as real estate attorneys in their second edition, and I was one of the 31. And that covered Los Angeles and Orange County. So that was pretty good. If you Google my name, at least at one time, I assume it's still there. I a witness in a malpractice case, which was interesting how I got to that point. But anyway, let me digress a little bit. I worked for a Barclay Hollander, a real estate developer, and we were attempting to buy various pieces of real estate from the Catholic Church. The church had excess land because they were doubling the bodies. In other words, instead of just having one, they would put another one on top, and they had a lot of excess land because they didn't need all the land they had planned for. So we dealt with Monsignor Hawks of the Catholic Church and wined and dined him. And his Monsignor Hawks' brother needed an expert witness on a malpractice case he was handling. And so I was volunteered for the job. And I testified for 2 days. And the opposing opinion for the lawyer who was defending himself was his expert witness was Judge Gittleson. Now, Gittleson was a brilliant judge who did not get reelected because he made an unfavorable ruling on school busing, I believe. Anyway, he was still a brilliant guy. So, but anyway, the jury liked my testimony better than Judge Gittleson's, and it went up on appeal, and the Court of Appeals cites me by name in the decision favorably, and that's pretty neat. It was the case is Starr, S-T-A-R-R, I think. Yeah, I remember talking about being listed in best lawyers. I went to a party at Ray Watt's house. I knew Ray Watt pretty well. Ray Watt was, I worked for Ken Leventhal, and Ray Watt was his most important client. I prepared Ray Watt's first will when it was only worth about $1 million. And that was very early in the game because somewhere along the line he gave a $25 million gift to USC. So he was obviously successful, and he's got a building in Century City with the name Watt on it. So he was a really super performer. And I, along the line, I was asked to represent his wife. It wasn't his wife at the time. Her name was Joy. But they were living together in Beverly Hills, and they finally they were going to get married, and I was representing her in connection with her prenuptial agreement, and the wedding almost didn't take place. They had a big party on a Saturday night, and they didn't tell anybody anything, and they were planning on getting married around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But we hadn't settled on the prenup. We still had issues. And Joy is a strong lady, a beautiful lady, and very strong. And she wouldn't marry him until we got the prenup. And so there we are on a Saturday morning with a wedding scheduled at 4 o'clock, and we're not in agreement yet. And we just went back and forth, and she stood her ground, and she said, well, I'll just take away the wedding things I was going to put on the table, and it would just be a nice Saturday night party. And he conceded, and we got it what we wanted, and he admired her so much. he was so impressed with his wife and her being strong, and it worked out just fine there. At one of the Watt parties, I'm just rambling a little bit now, we sat down, Grandma and I were sitting next to Carl Jr. He was the owner and operator, and he didn't particularly care for the guy. But he did give me a card that was good for a free hamburger. I don't think I ever used it, but it was a souvenir that I thought was a big kick at the time. But anyway, at the party, Ray Watt's attorney at the time, Phil Nicholson, who was a real class, wonderful attorney, Castle Nicholson's a fine law firm, and he was the attorney on the prenup for Ray Watt while I was representing the wife. But Joy said, she made mention that, that we have two members of the best lawyers in America sitting here tonight. It was Phil Nicholson and me, and that was pretty special, very special. But she had a lot of interesting people there. She had Rhonda Fleming and Ann Landers and there were various notable, the sheriff, and different people that were always there. And I have pictures with your father and Diane taken at one of the Christmas parties, I think, for at the Watts. They brought in snow, and they did everything up just right. But basically, they had big jumbo shrimp, and and that, to me, that was the highlight of going to a Watt party. I think I've gone through enough of those special events. Let me take some of your questions first at this time.
Hey, Grandpa?
Yes.
Tell us how you met Grandma.
Oh, Grandma was a blind date. I joined the Kappa Nu fraternity in my sophomore year at Penn, and there were four of us who were very, very close. Warren Schultz, who was a returning vet on GI Bill, became like a father figure to me, sort of. We grew together and we bunked together at one point. And the other two were Arnie Levinson and Dick Levy. Now Dick Levy comes along in the storytelling, and I needed a date, and Dick said, "Okay, I'll lend this girl to you. I want her back." And in the meantime, he had met someone else, and he was having a good time with her, and so he wasn't in a hurry to get her back, and I wasn't in a hurry to give her back. But anyway, the first night almost didn't come about because we were waiting for a 7-inch Dumont TV to be delivered to the fraternity. This was a big deal. This is 1948. October 9th, 1948. I remember that date, and I celebrated and acknowledged it almost every day, and Grandma always forgot the day. At least she said she forgot it. And it was a running thing with us. But the guy was late, and we had to wait for him, and he called and said, we'll be there, and we didn't get there till past 10 o'clock. And I think Grandma changed into her pajamas at that point and given up on us. But we did show up, and she got dressed quickly, and with her best friend Shirley, and we got on a bus back to the fraternity, and that was our first date, which almost didn't happen. And I remember Arnie looking over to me on the bus and sort of wanting to know what I thought, and I gave him a thumbs up. And Grandma looked different at that time. It was a week before her 17th birthday, and she had stupid-looking eyebrows, just thin pencil-lined eyebrows. Somehow, I forgot when she lost that look, but it was not that flattering. But still, we hit it off, and I dated Grandma almost every week for the rest of the year, and that was my sophomore year. And then Grandma did something I never forgave her for. And I told her I never forgave her for it. This was at the end of the sophomore year. She invited me to her prom, which was a big deal for me because I had no money. And so it was an effort to rent the tux and buy some flowers and, make the effort and get there, and took her to the prom. And a week after that, she broke up with me. And she knew when she went to the prom that she was going to break up with me. And this was being planned, but her friend said, "Oh, you can't miss your prom because you'll never forgive yourself." So I didn't take that too kindly. I did not see Grandma at all during my junior year. I dated other ladies, and but at the senior year, I remember we were back in the fall of my senior year, which would be 1950, I guess. And I sent a birthday card to Grandma. It was the most cold, impersonal card I could find. And I didn't write anything on it except Dennis. And I mailed it to her. Next thing I know, I'm washing dishes at the fraternity. I was washing dishes with her cats to get food. I mean, it was part of easing my financial strains. And I get a call when I'm almost finished. "You got a phone call from a lady?" And Irv said, "Go ahead, I'll finish up." And I went and took the call, and it was Grandma. And we talked and started dating again. And we dated until we got married. What's your next question?
All right. So what made you and Grandma decide to move to California?
Oh, that's a little complicated to answer that one. There were several factors. We were watching Disneyland being built, and it was on TV every week, and so that was a factor. We watched the Rose Parade, and that looked wonderful. But the main factor was a crook. My Uncle Manny lived on the same street in North Hollywood, on 10th Street, about 7 or 8 houses up the street. These were row houses. And he had somebody over who came back from Philadelphia, from Los Angeles. And somehow we met him. I don't remember if it was at Manny's house or at Grandma's house. But he was asked, he was a crook, he was a bookie or something, and not a dangerous crook, but he was asked by the police chief to leave the city and not come back.
Wow.
But anyway, we were talking with him, and he was telling us all stories about Los Angeles and about how wonderful it was, and it was a combination of all these 3 things that got the juices going. So let me digress a little bit, because after my 2 years in the Army, we had decided to come out to Los Angeles. But before that, my father wanted me to see Jimmy Roosevelt, who was a congressman in the Fairfax area, and who was and he wanted me to have some contact when I came out here and not come out cold, which was a not nice thought on his part. And by the way, he was one of the factors to get me out to California too, because my father, I thought, was going to try and dominate my life, and I didn't want any part of that. So, well, that was another subtle reason. So, after the Army, he set up an appointment with me to see Jimmy Roosevelt at his Washington, D.C. Offices. He was a congressman. And he said, "You have to have a hat." I hated hats. So I got a little Panama hat, and because I was part of being dressed up. So I go, they put me in the outside office, I take off my hat, and went in to see Jimmy. Jimmy never saw the hat. So that was a waste. But he was nice and friendly, and I think he gave me a letter of introduction to a top attorney, which I never used. I think I may have called him, but it was going nowhere. It was not what I wanted anyway. And did I answer the question?
Yeah, you answered the question.
Okay. I mentioned Dick Levy on that first date. Dick was a very successful attorney. He became an attorney in New York, and when he was stationed in California during, well, he was in the Army, and we met him when he was out here. And he married a sensational-looking blonde who wanted to be a starlet, and I think her name was Joy. And Dick was not a good-looking man, but he had a personality that was a magnetic personality. He was terrific. And all kinds of stories with Dick Levy. He represented Caesar's Palace at one point. He had a broken leg at the time, and they met him at the tarmac and took him with a special limousine and offered him female entertainment, which he declined. He says he declined. Anyway, somewhere along the line, 20 years later, Dick is now an attorney in Illinois, in Chicago. I'm representing a client of mine, Ralphie Cohn, with a multi-million-dollar loan, real estate loan, and they're represented by a law firm in Chicago. And so I'm back and forth with the law firm, and we're getting a pretty good rapport. And I finally said at one point, he said, "I know this is silly. I only know one attorney in Chicago, and that's Richard Franco Levy." And he said, any chance you've run into him? And he pauses for a while, and he says, "Well, you asked me if I know Dick Levy." He said, "Well, I was his partner. I dated his daughter." And yeah, I know him very well. Next thing I know, I get a call from Dick from Chicago, and we're talking back and forth, and I asked him, "Well, do you want her back?" He said, he was only lending me Grandma for a while. And we had a good laugh over that. So his daughter apparently was a seeded tennis player in Illinois.
Wow.
And quite accomplished. So anyway, that's my Dick Levy story of that period. My best friend is my son. Your father.
Yeah.
Your father. I don't know. I got fouled up. Anyway, I've become very close to Jeff, and he's exceptional and a big part of my life. But
How did you and Bijan meet?
Well, it was 1978, and it was a convoluted thing. He it was a real estate deal that he got sold out from under, and I felt bad for him, and I told him I wouldn't charge him for for next time I would represent him. Anyway, Bijan had a project in Huntington Beach that took 5 years of work to put together. It was done with smoke and mirrors, and he had an optional one piece, a little sliver here, and somehow he put the whole thing together. As I say, it took 5 years. And about halfway through, we had numerous meetings, and he was in a partnership with his uncle, Harkavy. And he was complaining about, this is about 2.5 years into our relationship, and we were at dinner before some kind of a meeting. And he was worrying about his son, Brian, being short. And I said, don't worry about it. It's, he may be a late bloomer. I said, and I took out a bar mitzvah picture with Jeff, and he was shorter than my grandma in that picture. And I showed it to him, and they said, he's now taller than I am, and look how he was at his bar mitzvah. And I got a reaction I didn't expect. They looked at each other. Remember, this is 2.5 years into our relationship. Are you Jewish? So I didn't expect that reaction to it. But we had a lot of things, some interesting things too. In the processing, we wanted to keep out of the Coastal Commission. If the Coastal Commission was formed to protect rights of people along the coast, and if you're in the Coastal Commission, the red tape was horrendous. Now, if 1 inch of your property is in the Coastal Commission, then all of it is in there for processing purposes. And he found out there was a meeting in Sacramento, and where they were drawing the lines. And we flew up to Sacramento, the two of us, didn't know anybody, no one and we went into the meeting and and Peter Douglas was their attorney. I had seen Peter Douglas. He was involved with something locally that I knew about. And he ended up being president of the Coastal Commission. So but this was an interim part where he was just an attorney for him. And we got his attention, and we said, told him the problem. We have just a little bit that's in the Coastal Commission, and we'd like to be out of it. And he said, no problem. He went back, redrew the line, took us out of the Coastal Commission, and it was, to me, it was democracy in action. Yeah, we were just ordinary citizens going up to Sacramento and get without anybody, vouching for us, and we got relief, and we felt fantastic. It was a wonderful experience. And to this day, it still blows my mind that we were that successful.
Wow.
But we had all kinds of problems with that property. I got to say this about Bijan. There's a Jewish expression. He's a mensch. Bijan and his uncle ran out of money about halfway through this long process. But I kept working for them. I kept billing them, and I knew they weren't paying me. And until after 5 years, we were able to sell off a piece of the land for several millions of dollars. And the day escrow closed, came to my office. He and Meyer came to my office, and paid his back bill, about $80,000 at that point, and then made a separate gift of a 3-figure amount on top of that.
Wow.
To show his appreciation. It was amazing.
Wow.
So I bought my first Cadillac. I want to give some advice. I was a good negotiator, very successful. And I the secret, if there is a secret, was to know the other person's position and be sensitive to it and see if you can give the other person what they need and still be consistent with what you need, instead of just going blunt force and just pushing what you want. And an example with Bijan. This is a fairly recent example. Bijan had two partners and had substantial losses on a project in Huntington Beach. And some idiot real estate agent, IRS agent, IRS agent, was setting up a proposed deficiency denying these deductions. I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, not small change. So Mike Weinstein, who I shared offices with, who's an excellent CPA, and I went down to the IRS office in Laguna. We asked for an appeal, and we spent time with a senior guy, must have been maybe 60 years old, maybe, been around for a long time, and we knock ourselves out explaining why the guy is wrong and we're right. And he didn't give us a hint about anything. He was very cold and very professional, and we got nothing out of him. So we drive back, and I said, let me take a shot at giving him a settlement offer. Now, one of the partners was retired, and he had the smallest amount that was an issue. And I had met him at one of Bijan's functions, and so we got along pretty well. So I called him and I said, "You're retired. Do you need that loss?" He said, "No. I'm not in business anymore, so I don't need that. I don't need that loss for any future deals. There won't be any future deals." So I wrote a settlement offer in which I gave the guy a concession on the small amount and held firm on the amounts that for Bijan and Bijan's other partner. And it was accepted because he needed to show something where he accomplished something. If he had just given us what we had asked for, he would in effect be trashing one of his own agents, and it didn't look good. So we gave him enough to make it look good, and by satisfying his needs, we got our needs satisfied. So I think that's a good example of negotiating.
Okay, so tell us about your first tax case.
All right, let me break down my professional background. I spent 5 years after I was for a CPA. I worked for a CPA for a couple of years. Then I passed the bar, and I worked for 5 years for Harry Graham Bolter, who was a nationally known tax attorney. Then 12 years with Barclay Hollander, and then 40 years in private practice. And I never had a partner. I was of counsel to firms, but never had a partner. I wanted to sleep late in the morning, and I didn't want someone to second guess me. That was one of the real reasons. But anyway, I was with Harry Bolter, and Harry was an interesting guy. He gave me a postgraduate education that was invaluable. He taught me how to write. He was very clear, very concise, and I would write things, and he would proofread them and come back at me, and I learned how to write, and I was a good writer after that. But he gave me that education, and but Harry was interesting too in that Here he was, a major tax figure, and he didn't understand high school bookkeeping. He never knew why the left side and the right side balanced. Someone in high school bookkeeping who knew a lot more than he did in that respect. But anyway, he gave me my first tax case. And I was representing Pedro Armendariz, who's a very famous, I don't know if he was famous at that time, but he became a very famous actor, director, and Mexican personality. And the issues involved monies he received from Mary Pickford. Now, Mary Pickford was known as America's sweetheart. She, in the mostly silent film. I mean, she goes way, way back. And, but after she stopped acting, she still was very much involved with Hollywood. I think she won the Academy Award in the second year. But no, I think there was probably a silent film also. But she and her husband Douglas Fairbanks and Charlie Chaplin formed United Artists. She was the driving force in the Woodland Hills facility for actors, and she kept directing and producing, and as I said, was a constant force in Hollywood. So, but I say this was involving monies that she paid to Pedro, and I thought I might have to bring her in as a witness or something. So it didn't quite reach that point, because I kept working away with the attorney for the IRS, and I kept cutting down the amounts, finding reasons, substantiating the position he took on his tax return, and it got down to a very small amount. And we still had a pending tax court case, and they said, no, we don't believe in de minimis cases. If you know what de minimis is, it was something small.
Mm-hmm.
And so they dropped it, and I won the case. So that was my first case.
Your first case you won. That's pretty impressive.
My first case, and I won it. Yeah.
Tell us about Jimmy Hoffa and your trip to Chicago.
Okay. All right. I was with Barclay Hollander, and we had a project which originally was called Brayburn and then became Mountain Gate. Mountain Gate is a major project off the San Diego freeway,
Mm-hmm.
west of the freeway. And we needed money. And so we had a contact. He was a minor commissioner, I think, for door catcher or something. I don't know what he was, but he was a man about 300 pounds. So we went first class. He couldn't fit in the
In coach?
in the coach seats. And he had the contact, and we were going to meet the representative of the Teamsters Union about that alone. And so we met at the airport. We went back to the hotel, and this fellow, I don't remember his name, but he got lost for a while. They was keeping him, his attention diverted for a while. But anyway, trying to keep it G-rated.
Why?
Yeah, no G-rated. Give us the full story.
Give us all the details.
No, he was, they were sending some women up to him. Anyway, he finally comes back, and we talk, and we were talking about a loan of several hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he said, well, go, and he gives me a name and a phone number and an address and all. He said, that's my nephew, and he'll give you what you want, as long as there's six points for Jimmy. Now, a point is a percentage. So we could, if we wanted to borrow $300,000, we'd have to pay, what, $18,000 cash to Jimmy Hoffa. That was the deal.
Hmm.
As long as Jimmy got his 6 points, I could write whatever I wanted. So I went through with the meeting the next day, and it's true to what he said. Anything I asked for, it was 400,000, I don't remember exactly, and I could have what I wanted, and as long as I get 6% for Jimmy. So I came back to the office, and this was a time where Bobby Kennedy was working hard on the rackets and as Attorney General, and they decided, no, we don't want Bobby sitting in our lobby, and they passed on it, and we didn't go ahead with the loan.
Wow.
But it was an experience. And the next time I heard about this guy was in, his name was in the paper around, that he was being pardoned by Nixon.
Wow.
So I don't know exactly what went in between there, but actually he ended up in jail and Nixon pardoned him. So I was in high company there.
All right, down to the good stuff. What is your favorite dessert of all time?
Okay, that's a tough one. I've been going there. My favorite restaurant was Brandywine, which is near here, and excellent food. But Brandywine was sold, and it's not open for lunch anymore, and I have no idea what the new owners are doing. So what I'm saying is history. But they had a flourless chocolate cake with homemade espresso ice cream. That was fantastic. But that's a close competitor to the Godiva sundae at the Cheesecake Factory. So I can't really pick out which one. But the Godiva sundae is available to me, and the other one is not.
On a side note, I remember for your and Grandma's 50th anniversary, I think it was, we went to Bistro Gardens.
Okay.
And I had never been there before, and they had the most amazing chocolate souffle.
Oh,
and I had never had souffle before.
Oh, that was good.
And I've ever since been addicted to it, and it's all your fault.
Oh, my fault. It was very good. Very good.
All right. Tell us about your time in the Army.
Okay, that was a waste of 2 years. I never left New Jersey. And, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey for my basic training.
What year?
I was in 1954 to 56 is when I was in the Army. And went to clerk type of school. I was second in the clerk part, but I never graduated because I could never get up to 35 words a minute.
Mm.
So I sat in the bunk while the ceremonies went, the graduation ceremonies went on. But it didn't affect my assignment. I mean, everyone, it had nothing to do with that. So I got assigned to Camp Kilmer, which is about 30 miles south of New York in New Jersey. And I worked, that was interesting. I worked for Army Emergency Relief, and just clerical work. Nothing. I wasn't giving them anything. But the guy I worked for, Lieutenant Colonel Brown, was had a problem with McCarthy. I'm not exactly sure the details, but the McCarthy, he trashed a lot of people. Mm. Horrible human being. And here's a guy, 18 years, a real class guy, nice looking and kind and articulate and bright. He was an amazing human being. But he had spent 18 years and didn't get his commission renewed.
Oh.
So he had to get 20 years in to get his pension. So they allowed him to finish up as a master sergeant for his last 2 years. I thought that was very sad, because I liked Colonel Brown. But then Camp Kilmer was closed, and I had to stay away so I wouldn't get on KP at the tail end. And I had a friend who I would rather sleep than eat, and so he would bring me back some milk or something for my breakfast, and so I skipped breakfast.
Aw.
But I finally got reassigned back to Dix, to camp Fort Dix in New Jersey, and I was assigned to courts and boards section, and that was, just typing, a little bit slow typing, but I got to handle a couple of court martials, and that was fascinating. The one in which I take great pride in involved a sergeant who I did not like. He was a mean-tempered, he was African American, who had been wounded in Korea. But he was just a nasty human being, and he hit my captain.
Oh.
The captain was a nice guy, very nice guy, with a long, unpronounceable Polish name. I don't remember what it was. But they assigned his defense to a law student from Cornell who knew nothing, and they somehow I got picked to help him on the case. And the guy had amnesia. He didn't remember the event.
Oh.
Now, the psychiatrist wanted to bury the client. He was waiting for a question somewhere about that would on the definition of insanity. He was waiting to say, he's legally sane, but I wouldn't let that question come in. And so I handled his cross examination, and we got not guilty. But the captain was such a class act. He went out of his way to get the guy's wife to be there at the court martial to testify about how he would sometimes hit the wall or something and not know what he was doing, and so he was helping the defense, even though he was the victim.
Right. And
he was a real nice guy, and I felt good. The lieutenant who I worked with got all the hurrahs at his meeting with at the clubhouse, whatever, and he was a big hero. But I felt good. I engineered the not guilty on that one, and I tried to talk him into quitting the Army, and I don't know if he did or not. I told him it's going to happen again, and this time you dodged the bullet, and get out and get collect your pension and go. So I'm not sure if he did or not. I wasn't able to follow that up, but I gave him good advice. So and then I had another case, another court martial, where I sort of won. He was found guilty, but the reviewing officer threw out the guilty thing, and I sowed enough doubt about things in there, so he did get off, even though I didn't get a direct not guilty. So I'm 2 for 2.
Yeah.
That wasn't bad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, we all want to know, does our family have any mafia connections or connections to organized crime?
No, I didn't have. My Uncle Joe, who I loved dearly, was a career criminal. He went up the river 3 times, I believe, and his name was Joe. They said it was Karasik, but he went by the name of Joe Kress, and he was involved in the armed car robbery in 1935, 1936, the Ruble armed car robbery. He drove the getaway car. But and I love my Uncle Joe tremendously. But no organized crime that I know about.
Tell us about the armed robbery.
Pardon me?
Tell us about the armed robbery, the car getaway, with the diamonds and stuff.
Well, I don't know. My uncle had a garage, and he would borrow cars from the garage.
Borrow cars or?
No, borrow cars. I think he returned them. And I don't know if there's any bloodstains on them when they went back or not. I never asked and never found out about that. But I remember my Uncle Joe, we were spending a summer with a cousin in the Catskill Mountains, and he came by, and with my Aunt Mildred, and we drove us around in the rumble seat of his car, which was neat. I don't know if you've ever seen a rumble seat.
No.
And we have to look that up. So, anyway, I really loved Uncle Joe. And I've told this story. He came to visit when we were living in North Hollywood. And I think he involved Bob's story of the apartment house. But anyway, he came and he brought your father was, I don't know, 2 years old, 3 years old, I don't remember exactly. And he brought a toy machine gun.
Oh.
And he would show him how to use it.
Oh no.
And somewhere we still have that on tape, but I've never been able to really nail that down. I haven't thrown those tapes out. If someone really wanted to make an effort, they could find that tape.
So tell us about your parents and your grandparents.
Well, my father was a very, very successful attorney in New York. He was a pretty sad case. He was very introverted, but he was a brilliant attorney, handled a lot of appellate work, but he smoked 3 packs of Rollies a day.
Oh.
And at age 51, he was about ready to go into business himself. He lined up the insurance companies he would represent, and he was all set to go when he got a heart attack.
Oh.
He passed away around 71, so he lasted
20 years.
quite a bit after that. But that was his one chance for breaking out and being independent. But he worked for others all of his life. And
Tell us about your mom.
well, what about my mom? She was very, very, very beautiful lady, and they were married about 6 months before I was born. I had a difficult relationship with my mother at the end. Very, very difficult. She would take Jeff and Diane out and teach them how to steal, shoplift,
Oh no.
little things like that.
I didn't expect that.
You didn't expect that, was it?
No. And where did they live and grow up?
Well, my father
Brooklyn?
was in Brooklyn, and it was Grandma's fault for getting my mother out here. She was living in a bad situation, and she encouraged her to come on out and move to California, which she did. And it started out okay, but as I said, the relationship deteriorated after a period of time. It wasn't good. But I would see her at least once a month and take her out for dinner or something. You know, it kept some civility there.
Right. Have you ever visited the Playboy Mansion?
Oh yeah. Let me. Okay. I told you I worked for Barclay Hollander, and Mike Hollander and Sam Yorty were very good friends, social friends, not just political friends. Sam Yorty was mayor of Los Angeles. And there was a function at the Playboy Mansion in Los Angeles. Beautiful, beautiful grounds. There was a grotto underneath which many Playboy bunnies were photographed in very casual attire, and were in the Playboy magazine. But this was a G-rated function. Your father thinks it was a charity deal. I think it was a deal for Sam Yorty. And I'll tell you something else about Yorty. Don't want to forget afterward. So we went to the grounds, and Grandma gets into a long conversation with Charo. Charo is an entertainer, very well-known, hot, bubbly South American type, famous guitar player among other things. And but the big thing is that he had animals, and he had a gamekeeper, and he had ducks. He had mandarin ducks. We never saw a mandarin duck before. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous animal. And we come back afterward, and within a week, I'm building the duck pond that's still out in the back. And we got mandarin ducks and a wood duck, and they were gorgeous, but they were so difficult to keep. He cleaned that out, and 3 minutes later it was filthy again. And you couldn't keep ahead of it, but they were beautiful, beautiful animals. But anyway, let me tell you about Yorty. That's another story. There was the city council passed a law involving golf courses, and in effect it would have forced us. There was a golf course in Mountain Gate, and it would have forced us to make it public. And I was given the job, and I relished it, of writing Sam Yorty's veto message, and which I did, and it was adopted almost word for word, and he vetoed it. And as a result, we were able to keep private ownership of the golf course, which meant that was a big dollar
Yeah, I'm sure.
advantage, yes.
Tell us about getting sick in your last year of law school.
Yeah, okay. Now, that was an emotional situation. I had hepatitis, and I think it was, they call it viral hepatitis. I think it was probably a B. I'm not exactly sure what it is converted today. But I couldn't read, and I was in bad shape for a while, and Grandma used to read to me, and I would dictate my notes. Well, Grandma was a big help for me in law school because I would dictate to her, and I would take a long, complicated case and break it down into 2 or 3 paragraphs. So when it came down to at the end, I didn't have to go through a study bit. I just read my notes, and they were very concise, and I had everything that I needed right there. But anyway, getting back to that, and my mother freaked out. She was going to charge Grandma with murder if something happened to me. She went off the rails. And I got back after being out 3 weeks. And I found out later if I had stayed out one more day, I wouldn't have graduated because I had to be there a minimum amount of time.
Wow.
So I cut it real close. I didn't know it at the time, but I found that out later.
Wow.
I found out a lot of things about me because I was working for a CPA, Howard Roth, and one of my jobs, which I went to on a Saturday, was auto, like a Pep Boys, but smaller that thing, auto repairers and auto items, and we had a great relationship. And he was dating the vice principal of the law school.
Oh.
So I found out stuff about me through him. But anyway, I did get there and made it in time and did graduate.
Pretty impressive. Tell us about Stallion Springs.
That was pretty much that. Stallion Springs was interesting. It's a beautiful country up there, and we went up there and had the free food that they were using to lure us. And I was interested in it because Mark the Hollander had looked at the property thinking for development, and they passed on it, but it was something they had considered, and I was just curious. So we went up there, and the salesman said, what he was trying to get us interested, and Grandma laid down criteria. I don't want to see any wires, and I want to clear view, and a whole mess of stuff that was that should have discouraged anyone. And he said, well, just so happens that our vice president had picked out a lot right across from the main clubhouse, and he's been reassigned, and it's now available, and it fits all your criteria.
There you go. So you bought it.
And we ended up buying it, and we found a builder, Larry Smead, fantastic guy. We just love Larry, and he built it out for us, and we had some nice time there. We spent several years up there, but Jeff and Diane, they got tired of it. It was a long drive, 2-hour drive or so, and no TV. But I remember one incident, I'm laughing about it. They had a sheriff who was out of Central Casting, very handsome, and he had a gorgeous, gorgeous wife. And they came up one day on horseback, and I was working and doing something, and I was sweating and looking horrible. And he was telling us that if anyone escapes from the Tehachapi prison, which was not far away, just let them pass through. And he gave us instructions. And Anyway, they finally left, and our kid and grandma said, "Did you see how she looked at me?" Anyway, I was so grungy at that point. Anyway, we got invited to the house, and they had a pet mountain lion.
A pet mountain lion?
A pet mountain lion, yes.
What do you do with a pet mountain lion?
I don't know. But anyway, it was fantastic experience. I've forgotten all about that just until now.
I guess I'm curious if you would tell us a little bit more about your parents and maybe even their parents, what you know about your family coming to America, and kind of the history that's associated with that.
Okay, let's take my mother's side first. My grandfather was from Russia, or I think what they call White Russia, and he married my grandmother who was born in Leeds,
England.
London, and that was an interesting story there. I triggered some thought, but I'll get to that in a minute if I have the time. They were first cousins, which is probably a no-no, but anyway, they were first cousins, and I don't think I suffered from that. But I love my grandparents very much. They were good people, and my father, that was on my father's side. I'm getting a little mixed up. That was
Your mother's side?
Yeah, that was my father's side, the one from White Russia to England. On my mother's side, it was they were peasants in Kiev, Russia, and my grandfather was very, very handsome, a redhead, and he came over first, and I guess he liked it too much. He wasn't in any big hurry to bring the rest of the family over. He was having too good a time. Anyway, they finally got the rest of the family over here, and my grandmother never let him forget it. She dogged him the rest of his life.
Now
And did they come to New York?
Yes, I'm sure.
So your grandparents lived in New York then?
Yes.
And that's where your parents were born?
Yeah, my father was born in New Jersey. And my grandfather sold candy.
Okay. And your mother was born in
Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn?
Yeah.
And then, to that same regard, I don't know how much you would know, but about Phyllis's parents and grandparents.
Mm-hmm. Well, I knew both of them. Her father Joe and I got along very well, but he was a difficult guy, and there was Grandma slept with a knife under her pillow at one stage. It was a lot of tension there. He worked on with the docks, getting shipments of food, and distributed them to the restaurants and to other people. I don't know exactly what he was doing, but he would get up at 4 in the morning and be out on his job. And he died when he was 49. He had another brother. There were 3 brothers. Another brother who also died at 49. And that brother was had a famous restaurant in Philadelphia called Benny the Bums. Mm-hmm. And the 3rd brother died a million deaths during his 49th year. It was he went through hell until he hit 50.
Yeah.
I think he lasted to his 70s, but that was we pitied him because he really suffered, thinking he was destined to go at that time.
And do you remember where Grandma's grandparents were from?
Yeah, I was from Kiev, in Russia.
Grandma's grandparents?
Her parents? No, I'm not exactly sure. I think Hungary. I think they were from Hungary. Yeah, I met them. Her grandmother was not a nice lady. She was kind of nasty, but her grandfather was a nice man, but he was a milquetoast, and he was completely dominated by the grandmother.
And he was from Hungary too?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was it. Yeah, we have a passport picture hanging on the wall.
Oh, great.
And I think that's from Hungary.
Okay.
Your dad was one of my students. And everyone knew what the relationship was. So when I called the roll, I mispronounced his name to kind of break the ice. And your dad was #1 student in law school. He was fantastic. Had a head of law review, and he had a scholarship from Seymour. And Seymour made him take every single course that was around. He worked harder than any other student in the place, and he was good. He had a good attitude, and I was very proud of the job he did. It was wonderful. Anyway, I remember class would end at 9:30, and they knew that they had to ask me any questions before 9:30, because by 9:30 I was out of there by like a shot, so I could get home and watch Hill Street Blues. Oh, I missed the story. And involving Martin Sheen.
Tell us about Martin Sheen.
Yeah, I'll tell you about Martin Sheen. Art Miller was president of the Malibu Bay Club, and he hired me to bring an arbitration against Mr. and Mrs. Martin Sheen. Now, Martin Sheen was a fantastic actor. I think his first major role may have been a co-star with Brando in Apocalypse Now. He also was the president in West Wing being the West Wing of the White House. And he was the president, and really, I'd say West Wing was the second best serial ever. The first one being Dallas. And but what West Wing, I think I would rate number 2 as the best. It was a terrific series. So anyway, we had this meeting up in Century City with Mr. and Mrs. Martin Sheen, and he was such a class act, such a nice guy. We really liked him. His wife was something else. she was difficult. But anyway, we took a break, and they talked after a while, and we came back, and he talked his wife into conceding and going along with what we wanted, and we were successful in that arbitration. But I enjoyed meeting him because he was such a fantastic person, very religious guy, but he just exuded a certain niceness about him. I don't know how else to describe it. It was a good experience. So, I've had some contacts with different celebrities. I said my most famous is when I was with Walter. I was we were representing Pat DeSico. Pat DeSico was handling the catering for used aircraft. And he knew a lot of Hollywood people, and he was under a criminal tax fraud investigation. And I went to meet him, and he picks up the phone and says, have him wait till he finishes up with me for another 20 minutes. Finally, he opens up the door, and he introduces me to Gary Cooper. and that was sensational. Cooper's one of my favorite actors of all time.
Oh. What was your favorite movie of all time?
Oh, I don't know if I can pick up. You could say Gone with the Wind, but no, I don't really know. I don't know if I had a favorite movie.